We're gonna come out of executive. We're out now. we doing, Jen? We're good to go?
Yep, and Brian and Ruth will take that spot of the Missoula schools.
Go ahead, Carol.
I just wanted to let you know, at 11:30, I have Jill Scott coming to meet with me on the, what do you call those things? Skate park, the skate parks. And so I'm just gonna step out and meet with her. So thanks, Lynn.
Okay, we're back after break. Who we up, Jen? Who's up?
Irma, enrollment. You got it, Irma.
We've been waiting for.
Uh-huh. You know, it's always good to see you. It really is. Good morning.
Oh, yeah. Good morning. I'm here to request approval for the August 3rd, 2022 per capita resolution.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Motion to approve by Jennifer. Second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous.
All righty, thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, Whisper, I think, come on up.
Kisuk Withnam, working on it. My Kisuk Withnam. Good morning, everybody. I'm here today to present about or to talk about commercial recreation permits. I had received my very first one from a tribal member who was doing business as native waters fly fishing and had requested to be able to have a commercial guided business along the river. And I'm going to share my screen. This is my first time doing it here, so one moment. We are on page 5. But I have a little caveat because in recent days, up until yesterday, we just became aware that our only other commercial recreation permit that we have issued to the Flathead Raft Company, the company has sold to a different owner. On Sunday, I believe they posted on Facebook that they are under new ownership. Amanda contacted Tammy and asked her for the name of the new owner, and she was provided that. We looked at one of the old permits that we think is the one that we have in place with her, and that permit says that it is transferability. The contract for recreational use permit shall only be transferred with prior written consent from the tribes. So we are now at a position where we maybe need to make a global decision about what we're doing with our commercial recreation permits, because you have a resolution about supporting tribal member businesses, and some of that is incorporated here. I did receive comments back from an interdisciplinary group of people in natural resources and culture committees about the other commercial permit, and there's varying opinions. Culture committees were not in favor of this type of activity, but I think that there is some room to maybe clarify this commercial permit or to have it so that we can move forward productively. We have not contacted Flathead Raft Company yet. That's on the agenda for today, hopefully, to call them and say you're operating under an invalid, you don't have a permit to do what you're doing. My guess is we'll be here with them soon. I'm not sure if there's a tribal member included in the ownership of that business at this time, but I'm I guess, looking maybe for some guidance from you if you want to try to move forward with the one commercial recreation permit that we have on the table, or if we need to take a bigger view of this in light of the other one that's going to be coming up, or, I mean, maybe how to move forward on this.
Thank you, Whisper. Just a little backdrop, since I was involved with Amanda with this in the past. The group use permit of a commercial nature, like these are, started out with, the origins go back to Chef's Kiss Ranch and the Glacier Raft Company. And through time, through staff recommendation, primarily myself, was to, always reserve the opportunity for a tribal business to be able to pursue these tourism related businesses. And so there were longer term contracts. The longest term group contract we've ever had is 5 years. And they started out about like that for everybody. And then we started shortening them down to, for non-member businesses, just annual, in case some tribal member wanted to come forward and operate a business like that. So that was an emphasis for the Glacier Raft Company to be sold to a tribal member, which was Fred Matt. And then in order for a tribal member to get, startup funding or borrow money to buy the assets, a short-term 1-year permit is just not something that you can go to a bank with. So for tribal members, then council did that, obviously went to the max that they've had before, was 5-year contract, group use contract for the Flathead Raft Company and its creation. It's changed from Glacier Raft Company to Flathead Raft Company. And that's kind of the way that's been going. They did expand their permit through time to include and help fill the void. We were holding back a lot of commercial guides that were non-member businesses on Flathead Lake, hoping that the south half we would have some tribal members want to do that. We did permit a couple in the past that did do that. There were tribal members. I think Franny Cahoon had a permit once, and Charlie, the guy that ran the Charcusta News back in the day, had one that managed the Charcusta News. You remember Hanson? Was it? He had a guided permit for Flathead Lake back in the day. Anyway, those all kind of fell to the wayside when we were looking for that void. And so we actually asked the raft company if they would entertain charter fishing on Flathead Lake so that we'd have that opportunity to put even more pressure on lake trout reduction. So they did expand their permit to that, along with scenic boat rides on Flathead Lake. At that same time, they wanted to look at the rest of the reservation if there was an opportunity. So those fishable waters and most of the places where non-members are allowed, they also asked for the potential to be a guided fisher, angler business for that. And they had historically done an overnight campsite on Horseshoe Bend for another youth crew that we used to have back in the day. Was like a high school Peace Corps group called Visions International. And so they would camp one day, they'd take them down the lower river, get a special permit to go from Buffalo Bridge to Sloan's and spend one night on the river. So that opportunity was added to the Glacier Raft Company permit. So the permit that the Glacier Raft Company had was those basic tenets were there. They were added on with the Flathead Raft Company being a tribal member business as far as fishing. And so the standing for the permit for the raft company, if it was in effect today, which it's not because it's now been sold. So there is no raft company permit in effect. But if it would have been, it would have allowed the normal business of whitewater from the dam down to Buffalo Bridge, the opportunity to do float trips from Buffalo to Sloan's Bridge in an overnight at Horseshoe Bend, and then the opportunity to do scenic boat rides on Flathead Lake, guided fishing on Flathead Lake, and guided fishing on other waters of the reservation. That was the last standing of their contract, as I recall it. So that was they were our last commercial fishing business. It was a tribal member owned business. And now there isn't. So this request here would be unique. The Chef Giss Ranch used to have a permit, I think it's expired, where they would do day rides to Swartz Lake Trailhead and day rides to the Post Creek Trailhead at McDonald Lake. And that was their limited zone of use. They haven't done that for quite some years, I believe. So it is a good opportunity right now. You're free and clear of any guided outfitting on the reservation, whether it would be by a tribal member or a non-member. So what Whisper says, it is a golden opportunity to look at it. Historically, the tribal council has reserved this opportunity for tribal members if they're there or they're part of the business. So we don't know the new company if they have a tribal stakeholder or it's a tribal member in the ownership of the business. We don't know that yet. That's where we're at. Mr. Pablo contacted me last fall about his opportunity, and he added Mission Creek down by the bison range because of that unique opportunity of the bison range and anglers there. That, you know, that might be a better tool there for people fishing along the bison range to actually be with a guide. And then the opportunity on the other side of the Jocko River. But he was primarily interested in a 1 or 2 person float trip, non-motorized on the river, where you take people fishing for smallmouth bass on the Flathead River. And that's where he's at. He has low investment in his operation. And it's guided in small groups. So it's very favorable on the size that he's requesting, and very controlled. Knowing Mr. Pablo, he will be a steward to the environment and keeping his clients under control. Hopefully he doesn't get mad at his clients. That's what I'm worried about. Anyway, that's a little backdrop to what Whisper's bringing forward. So we do have a request from Greg Pablo and Native Waters Fly Fishing Incorporated. Of course, we always demand that they have insurance. Insurance protects us. And so there's risk associated with some of these things. The risk with the whitewater rafting, of course, there's potential for people to drown. And sometimes the insurance got so expensive, those guys would self-insure. They group themselves together and provide their own policy, similar to Amarid, you know, the tribes have done. So he may be part of that insurance. I don't know what Craig's insurance is, but that's what he would have to do, is indemnify the tribes and have enough coverage if someone was to inadvertently die on one of his expeditions, that we would be held liable, or it'd be enough insurance to cover us as the first hit. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a question. How does the Cultural Waterways Ordinance interact with the permitting system? I was wondering if anybody looked at that.
The ordinance, if I recall it correctly, would allow something like this to occur. It was allowable under the current plan, which is the goals and objectives for the Lower Flathead River Corridor, allows it, and actually it favors guided versus unguided use. So if you have unguided use out there, people running willy-nilly, they expect them to go by the regulations, you're at more odds of causing environmental harm than if they're with a tribal member guide or a guide of a commercial outfitter, because then there's eyes on them and they're keeping control of them. So it's actually favored when it's controlled. Huh? Yeah, well, the other thing is that the exact plan that's called for under the Cultural Rivers Ordinance, Protected Waterways Ordinance for the Flathead River hasn't been written yet. So it could be written out in that particular site-specific plan. And that is now under Whisper's task list.
I'll add it to the list.
Go ahead, Carol.
I was just curious, we probably don't know how much it was sold for, but having a permit is probably part of that. So I don't know if there's some potential liability on somebody's part, but I don't know, I think you're right to contact them as soon as possible and let them know they don't have a permit.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm guessing that as soon as we contact them, they're going to try to be coming in here to get their permit approved as soon as possible. When I drove by, the parking lot was full. I mean, they're out there doing stuff and their paperwork says that she had, that it doesn't transfer. So, one thing I was thinking, and Amanda and I talked about yesterday, was we want to get a policy and procedure in place, really, with all of our commercial and group use and educational permits, since we came last week and talked about that as well, so that we have them all written down and categorized so that we know where everybody goes. Some of the language in our contracts might change if we get them through legal and add the insurance and make sure that we have all of that. They're already required to get insurance, but I just want to make sure that language is solid in there. So we may need another legal review. If we do approve these things, I'm thinking about Flathead Raft Company in the short term, that we only do a year so that we can get our little program in place and all of our permits ready to go, so that next year we have maybe a little different system.
Whisper, Brian's in the room and of course he's busy conversing with Ruth, but in the development of special use permits for the bison range, Brian worked with me to make some recommendations for those permits at the bison range. So that's the most current language, and it was based upon our group use contract and permit that we already had in existence. So Brian has some of that information, so you might want to converse with Brian on that. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead, Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. In regards to the raft company operation, so right now, as it sets, they're out there and they're doing guided trips.
I've seen
And
them.
their permit is not valid, is what I understand. So as it sits right now, the tribes are liable for anything that happens out there. I mean, somebody drowns or falls off and gets hurt, and they don't have the insurance under the permit. They're going after the tribes. Would that-
Well, then, now that we
Right,
know that the business has been sold, we know that their current contract is void. So it's our due diligence to notify them as soon as possible, which I mentioned to Whisper yesterday, to cease and desist immediately.
Yeah.
And once we give them that notice, we've done our due diligence. We can't hide once we know it's sold. Yeah, we have a liability of them being an outlaw outfitter. Once we know.
Yeah.
So now we know.
In regards to Mr. Pablo's operation, I think we have a limited obligation to help our tribal members, especially in the tourist industry. I mean, we have very, very few of our members that really participate in it when it comes to the tour industry. And you know, I've seen a lot of Craig's videos that he posts, and it's just, the guy's quite the fisherman. I would like to see us support that and move forward with helping them out.
Did Mr. Pablo have a recommendation for length of contract?
He did not in his application indicate how long of a permit he was requesting. So I think default would be 1 year, as that's kind of where we've been. And as we're trying to get our stuff together, we could ask him to bring that forward again for next year.
So we would be looking at, you're recommending a year, an annual permit, once he obtains his insurance, et cetera, fulfilling the contract obligations for the recommended use areas that he's described. The one correction there, the middle fork of the Jocko up above the split in the road at the South Fork lies within the South Fork, so it would be a closed area. So the upper part would not be available. The main stem, of course, would be, the entire North Fork of the Jocko would be, but the Middle Fork and the South Fork pretty much are closed. There's only a very tiny piece of the Middle Fork that would be available to public access. So we might want to strike Middle Fork completely, and just say main stem. Maybe he meant the North Fork, I don't know.
He wrote walk and wade trips on the Middle Fork and Main Stem Jocko River for varying lengths from Lower Jocko Lake to the confluence with the Lower Flathead River.
Yeah, no, he's not mistaken. He made a mistake. Yeah, that's not available.
Okay.
We have to strike that. We have a motion by Len to approve a one-year permit based on the proposed proposal brought forward today with the correction of the removal of the Middle Fork of the Jocko. Go ahead, Bing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a permit area, I believe, from that third bridge up when you go towards Little Prairie. I think that's a permit area on up to Jocko Lakes through there. So would that area be qualify for the guys to fish in there too, if that's a permit area? Because that comes down from what Tom was saying, coming from the North Fork too, comes right down through there too, so into the Jocko River, back towards Pistol Creek, back going to Pistol Creek Road, comes down through there. So I'm not sure if that area would be open for that either, so I'm not sure. Like Tom was saying, he was questioning the North Fork too, and along with the Middle Fork through there. So I do believe, I'll think all that from that third bridge up would be a closed area.
Is this included as the main stem, or would that be in the closed area as well?
Well, the main stem would be after the last confluence. So after the Middle Fork hits, or the North Fork hits the main Jocko there. It's really not until all three tributaries are in the water body. That's where the main stem starts. So it'd be from there downstream. So what Bing's talking about is actually upstream of that. And that wouldn't be included in his request. Any other discussion points? We have a motion by Len, second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Can't see Martin. Okay. We have 8-4 being abstained. Thank you, Whisper.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Hey, Baylor. Okay, we have Brian and Ruth.
That'll be your 1 o'clock information, pages 13 to 15 right now, and then 16 to 23.
Morning, Chairman. Good morning, Council. The first issue we have for you is a follow-up to some of the Polson annexation discussion that we've had before. They just, city staff just let me know that they were expecting or hoping to have the waiver of protest form signed before the public hearing and the city commission action on Monday. So that's what's on page 11 of your packet. I was not aware that was something they were expecting to have done beforehand. So if you're able to look at that, this form is consistent with what I've discussed with you in the past. It's a modification from their prior form that takes out language that wouldn't have been applicable and just would have been something we wouldn't probably want to sign on to in a waiver of protest. So what you have in front of you is a 20-year waiver, and it's limited to special improvement districts for curbs, gutters, roads, sidewalks, and stormwater improvements. As I'd mentioned before, special improvement districts can be for a wide variety of purposes. So this narrows it down considerably. So I can answer any questions, or if you, depending on the questions, we could go into executive as well. If the council is still amenable, which was my understanding from our last discussion, we would just need approval for the chairman to sign it. And then I would provide it to city staff so it could be made available with the packet for the commissioners.
Thank you, Brian. I know you covered it pretty well from my understanding of it. So I am certainly, at least as one council member, ready to sign it, approve this. It is very limited in scope, and it's 20-year term. It's almost pretty normal protocol for this type of a thing. So any questions for Brian on it? The hearing is Monday night. Any problems? If there isn't any, I would entertain a motion to approve the authorization of the chair's signature on the waiver of protest to special improvement district for the city of Folsom. Motion by Mike. Second by Lamb. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Chairman. And I did confirm that the public hearing is 6:30 on Monday, and the city commission meeting starts at 7. Not much on the agenda, so they don't expect it to be too long. So thank you for that. And with that, we can move to the self-governance briefing. There are a few things associated with this, as we had talked about before. There's an upcoming conference on self-governance. The negotiated rulemaking committee has finally been seated. Ruth and I have been talking about this sporadically for a year or more, actually, since the Progress Act, which is the amendments to the Interior Self-Governance Statutes, was passed over a year and a half ago. So the Interior Department is very delinquent in having this started. I meant to double check. The statutory deadline for these regulations to be enacted, I believe, is June of 23. If I'm off, it's just by a few months. We don't have much time. They're going to need to extend that deadline, and there's a movement amongst tribes to do that, led by the longtime informal leaders of self-governance, the Tribal Self-Governance Advisory Council. So I'll just mention associated with that, Ryan had forwarded this Federal Register notice to me the day it was published in the Federal Register. And that's the only reason I know about this. I haven't heard about this from anybody else. None of our Washington representatives, not the self-governance education and advising committee, which usually are pretty good at getting this word out. So part of what Ryan had let me know about is that the Sinoski folks are involved in the effort to try to get the statutory extension for when these regulations have to be finalized. Apparently Sinoski's got some sort of coalition of self-governance tribes that Ryan said that we could participate in if we wanted to. It's based on that model of the Contract Support Cost Coalition that we've participated in with the Sinoski firm for, I want to say, almost 15 years. It's been a long time. And I think that's been super successful. So that model has been great. They've been very effective. We cost share with many other tribes. So the bang for the buck, I think, is great. With respect to this self-governance coalition, I asked Ryan, this is the first I'd ever heard about it. I asked Ryan for more information and I said, you know, if that's something that we're going to be doing ourselves, particularly while we're active on the NEG-REG committee, we may not need it, but if it's doing something additional or constructive for us, like the Contract Support Cost Coalition, then maybe we'd definitely want to entertain that. So I'll get that information back to you when we get more information about what exactly they're doing. My own initial thought anyway is if it's just or primarily at this point about extending the statutory deadline, I would hate to see the tribe spend any money on that. I mean, the feds almost have to do it anyway. And if other people want to spend time on making that happen, I would almost just say, let them do it and not spend money. But we'll get more information and bring that back to you. So just in terms of a quick briefing about that negotiated rulemaking committee, aside from the deadline, they've not announced their first meeting. I understand that they will have early on or as part of their first meeting, like training on some of the federal laws that just undergird this structure, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, the Negotiated Rulemaking Act, and things like that. So the first meeting's probably not going to have much substance to it, but it will be important in terms of how this show is going to run.
This is the meeting at the end of July, first week of August.
Sorry, so unless they are really smart and decide to make it at that time, it's not scheduled yet. The meeting at the beginning of August is just the annual tribally led tribal self-governance conference. And that is typically when the feds will have consultations, et cetera. It would sure make sense for them to have this at that time, but this is also going to be hybrid. And I believe the notice for this negotiated rulemaking committee may have alluded to that being hybrid as well. Sorry, I'll have to double check on that. But right now, there's no plans for them to capitalize on the August meeting with respect to the negotiated rulemaking committee. So we'll see. There's still 2 months, and that would be the logical thing to do. But we're waiting on that. We'll keep you updated on that when that first meeting gets scheduled or whatever further developments there are. In the meantime, I mean, this was quite a while ago, but part of the discussions Ruth and I have been what to recommend to the council in terms of where to spend your energy with these new regulations. And it's been our shared consensus that for the most part, the existing self-governance regs for interior have not really been a problem for us. And, you know, in some ways they're pretty good. In other ways, they're just not offensive. But the areas that probably would be most beneficial for CSKT to look at and change would involve non-BIA contracting, would involve waivers of federal regulation. Those are almost never given in my experience, and it just doesn't make sense. I just think tribes haven't generally front burnered those into challenges for various reasons, but that could be made much more tribal friendly. And then also kind of an emerging area is with leasing. The self-governance regs allow for, I shouldn't say allow, but I mean, part of that structure is feds paying for space with tribes when tribes are contracting those programs. And for the most part, there's not been money attached to that. Sometime within the last 5 years, Interior has made more of an effort to promote, I guess, what I would call equitable leasing arrangements for tribes. And I believe, and Ruth can correct me if I'm wrong, that they might be devoting more money to that, and that's partly why they're promoting it. I don't know how much money. I don't know how sufficient that is. I've got a lot to try to get up to speed on with respect to that. But that is a big issue that ends up just being dollars and equity. So that's something that Ruth and I thought could probably be addressed as part of the negotiated rulemaking committee effort too. And that would be something that would make a lot of sense
That
for
would
us.
be on top of indirect.
Right.
And wasn't there somebody already doing
Well-
that? Is it, I thought there was something recently in the last few months that I read that, how come we're not doing that? Was that, maybe was it from you, Ruth? I can't
We've
remember.
been in this so long. Why haven't we been doing this? As Brian was saying, and yes, Mr. Chairman, in the early years, immediately after self-governance became permanent in both agencies, it's like they had to catch up to all of the in-practice implementation of that as tribes began to take the programs. And naturally, many tribes, ours included, if we weren't actually conveyed those federal properties that the feds already had, we were either looking for our own facilities, constructing our own facilities, buying our own facilities. And the leasing costs did not keep up with the appropriations, or appropriations didn't keep up with the actual leasing costs. And many tribes just simply they forego it. Like, why ask for something you're not going to get? So like contract support costs, it was very underfunded. But in recent years, when Congress has finally woken up to the fact that this is provided in the statute, and if the tribe is endeavoring for this, then it has to be funded. So it's finally starting to kind of take a real big upshift in both Indian Health Service and Indian Affairs. I was commenting to Brian that unfortunately, Indian Health Service is really wedded to its facilities methodology. So there is not the level of flexibility that Interior would grant us in all of the different programs that we operate currently, such as police and detention and social services and natural resources. So those are good opportunities. Your comment about on top of indirect, it actually does change the indirect that becomes available, because a portion of our indirect does go for facilities maintenance. So this is why we have to evaluate the different types of leases that would apply to our facilities and look at how that may offset or change. I guess the easy answer, the simple answer is we would not see any reduction in funding, but it would be the different types that would come in. And it's certainly something that our tribe needs to look at, because we have a large organization and multitudes of facilities that we all know are costly. The tribe is shouldering pretty much all of the costs of that, and it's a good forward-thinking move. So yeah.
Prepare the invoices and let's get them out.
Right. The good thing about the leasing proposals is they're not limited to a clock or a time frame. Once we submit a proposal, the clock starts for the government's obligation to pay those costs once we execute a lease and it's approved. So we were hoping to get one in place for the Arley facility in the health care system by this October, and also to do our buildings that are attached to the Indian Affairs Agreement, which is quite a lot of different facilities. So we're working on that right now.
Great. That's any other questions from council on that? Chase the money.
And that's, I think, Ruth just described, a great example of how this could be addressed through regulations in terms of, it's great that the Bureau is apparently making noise that they're not going to be wed to their own methodologies like IHS is, but that could change, and locking that type of thing into the regulations is a good example of what we might be able to accomplish with the NEGREG committee. And I also just need to say, when you say why aren't we doing that, or why didn't we know about that? So this has been on my radar for a few years, since they had a few trainings about this leasing opportunity. And I never got it front burnered up to really kind of learn more about it, attend the briefings or brief you. So I just want to let you know that that is something I was aware of. And I apologize if we're missing the boat on anything, but I haven't been able to get up to speed on it yet. So a couple of the other points with respect to the negotiated rulemaking committee, at least in terms of just the context by which staff is approaching it, there are opportunities for self-governance like agreements with the U.S. Forest Service. We haven't taken advantage of them. They're somewhat more constrained than just the non-BIA contracting that's generally available at Interior. But I would expect that self-governance will come to the Forest Service at some point, hopefully sooner instead of later, in a full-fledged form. So when we're dealing with these regulations could be around another 25 years, just like the last ones. And the more proactive we are across the board on these regs, that will influence the regs that USDA and Forest Service ultimately develop, as well as hopefully Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, and other departments, EPA. So that's another way we're looking at this is, just to try to do the best we can. So whatever comes down the pike later, there's a good example and model for the federal departments to follow. So Secretary Charlo and Councilmember Dolson and myself are planning on attending the August self-governance conference. I don't believe Ruth's able to or will be attending that, at least at this point. Our primary purpose, I haven't been to one of these self-governance conferences in a long time. And when you have something to accomplish, they are very constructive because the right people are there. And I think that's what our situation is now is this is our chance to start identifying our priorities and talking to people and developing allies, but also seeing what other people are talking about, what priorities they have, and seeing how we want to respond or work with them on that or work against them, depending on what it is. I should say too, just for context, this group has done a lot of great work over 2 decades. Some of the leaders of this group in self-governance, but this is also the same group that was ready to just get rid of non-BIA contracting 15 years ago while you were negotiating for the Bison Range contract. So the non-BIA part is a little different with this crowd. I know that in principle, they're super supportive of it, but that support is very shallow, or at least it has been in the past. So there's probably going to be a lot of weight on our shoulders if we really want to be aggressive with non-BIA contracting. And I think they'll be pretty supportive of it because this is very different than trying to develop congressional legislation and get that support. So I don't think it will be as difficult for these traditional self-governance leaders to support us on that in this context, hopefully. But also, I just want to remind you that, Assistant Secretary Newland was making comments very supportive of us trying to take that stance. And I plan on reminding people about that a lot, and hopefully him. But I think we have a good landscape is what I just
I
want
see
to say.
Scott Aikens on the.
Yes. Yeah. And so on that note, I'll just remind folks that the negotiated rulemaking committee looks to me very favorable for us because the federal representatives are Sherry Freeman. I don't know if she's starting to think about retirement or not. I don't know what her workload is. If she's able to participate, that's a slam dunk for us. She's great. She's great substantively. She's also great because she knows how every nut and bolt works in that shop. She's fantastic. I would expect she probably will not be able to do a lot of this and might be delegating it to her alternate, which is Matt Kalapa, who we've been working with. We've worked with him for a long time across the board. I've worked with him over the past year on the Montana Water Rights Protection Act, self-governance amendments and the MOA. I think we've got a really good relationship with him, so that's very favorable. And then Scott Aiken, like you mentioned, Chairman, is one of the federal delegates who's a very strong supporter of us in particular, or your efforts. And then Rose Petoskey, I've known personally. I used to work for her dad. That family is impressive, and I have not had much, I haven't had any interaction with her since she got in this position, but I think she's going to be a very good and supportive player. She's a member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa. They've been one of the earliest self-governance tribes as well. I think she'll be very constructive on this. So yeah, this landscape I think is good, let alone the support you have within the Interior Department from the Secretary on down. And then I think, is there anything else I'm forgetting? The only other thing that I wanted to follow up on is when we last talked about this with you, I talked to you about the conversation I had with Martha Williams about a potential field trip to countries that have been doing co-management with Indigenous groups for a long time, and have had a great success in doing that. I have got a letter started. I was hoping to share that with you today. I don't have it finalized, but I just want to let you know that that's on the top of my list to get back to you soon, so this doesn't go cold. And there will be a lot of choices to make, so I'll probably ask for some time with you to kind of go through those choices, being where you may want to propose going, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, Canada, or whatever. I kind of smile too when they talk about going down under, but the examples there are no less sound. And, you know, maybe with further research, I don't know how they stack up against Canada's, but there's no reason not to, from a standpoint of trying to go where the success is and learn from them. But also some of the other considerations would be who you may want to propose going on that, in terms of, you know, the National Park Service Director is an easy suggestion, but a number of other folks too, Forest Service representatives, BLM. There's a lot of choices for you there in terms of how you may want to suggest this. And same with tribal representatives. It seems to me that having somebody from a tribe that pushed successfully for Bears Ears designation and as part of that management or advisory team, I think that would be a very smart addition. But those kind of choices are what we can talk to you about.
Sure. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't operate Hungry Horse Dam from Bureau of Reclamation.
I'm sorry, you said a Bureau of Rec?
Hungry Horse Dam, why we wouldn't
Oh,
operate
right.
that.
Okay, gotcha.
Easy peasy. Mike?
Would it be possible to actually make a list of the potential contracts?
Potential contracts with Interior or any federal? Sure. Yes. So what I will do, unless you direct otherwise, is I will try to do one that would be most, what's the word? Most practical in the short term. If you want creative, I can go creative too. I mean, it's true. I mean, if you're talking expansively and if you're looking ahead at where self-governance should go, I mean, there should be State Department and there's a lot. And, you know, I can't even do justice to a list like that. I can think of a lot of things and add them, and I will do that, but it's super expansive. If you want to take that large of a lens on it, sure.
Well, it's just more money and more jobs, right?
Yeah, I will. So I'll provide that. I'll get that with you. Excuse me, or get that for you as well.
Yeah, the only reason I mentioned those down under ones, I think Australia actually was a catalyst for Canada. But that's the only reason I even mentioned them.
Well, and super, I mean, I went to their biggest park and before I went to law school, I mean, a long time ago, but their presence with the Aboriginal community there who owns the land, it made a huge impression on me just as a layman going in there. Their involvement and their footprint in the park and their voice and their management practices were obvious to me even then without even reading more about it. But since having read their management plan and the history of how that came about, on paper, it's great. I mean, part of this effort too, and what I'll talk to you about when we get to a draft letter is I've done a fair amount of reading on this and, had that experience. And there's a lot of reasons to view this as very successful stuff. Certainly, they're so much farther ahead than we are. That's the bottom line. But I have not had an in-depth conversation with any of the First Nations in Canada or any Aboriginal parties in Australia about what their view of it is. Because on paper, things will always look better, especially if it's being presented by a federal agency or people associated. So there's a lot to learn, and that would also maybe, depending on how much you want us to put into that, that could also color whatever you may want to propose or who you would want to participate or where you would want to go if there were strong feelings from, say, the Assembly of First Nations in Canada about where some of the real successes in their views are in terms of places to visit. There's that kind of thing too.
We definitely want to look at the most successful stuff for sure. Because the wheel's been created, no sense in, we want to learn from that experience. So, yeah. We do. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the goal, is to learn from the mistakes and take the successes. But I'll try to get this letter to you as soon as I can, and there'll just be a lot of these kind of choices and discussions to consider in what you might want to do. I think that takes care of the self-governance briefing, unless there's any questions anybody has.
No questions? Thank you for those updates. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruthie. We'll see you later, Ruthie. We'll take a break. Get them set up. Are they zooming or are they coming? Oh, okay. Take a break. More donuts. Take two. Take a nap. Were you riding your bike the other day, weren't you? I was gonna ride mine this week, but then I have to pick up my granddaughter, so. I added baskets to ours. So you got front baskets, rear basket, and then I got a big, seat, extra big seat for, it's nice. And extra battery. I could make it. Well, the batteries go 28 miles. Mine do. Right. Not that I'm going to Missoula, but. The bike path the whole way.
They have to buy them after their term is up. They can receive the gift and then they have to give it to where they're at. And then when their term is up, they're allowed to purchase any gifts that they do want. We'll discuss before we adjourn today.
Okay, we'll come back into session after our break. And now we have Northwest Power Planning. Brian, come on up. You have some guests with you. Welcome, gentlemen. I recognize the one guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. I'd just like to introduce all of you, a joint introduction, I guess, to the Montana State representatives to the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, Mr. Mike Milburn and Mr. Douglas Grob. And you know Carrie Berg, I think already, is a longtime Montana staff for the the Northwest Power and Conservation Council in Helena. And the tribal council, as you know, I think we haven't really had a regular practice of regular meetings between the Montana State representatives and tribal council. I know a lot of us at the staff level, and I think at the council, think that might be a good idea to just kind of structure some more regular meetings. But council and chairman, I just turn it over to you and to the Montana State reps for any comments they want to make. And I would just, I guess, suggest, to the extent you could share like your priorities so far in your jobs and where your time's been spent, that might be helpful for the council to know and to spur some discussion. But I'll turn it over.
Welcome, Mike and Louis. Yeah, please, let's introduce yourself a little bit more and a little background and your interest, and we are so happy that you're here. We really appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us. And we certainly always have lots of issues we would like to work with you on or carry forward on our behalf. So thank you for coming.
You bet. It's a pleasure to meet all of you and to be here. I'm on the power committee, and I suspect that these guys are the fish.
Louis, could you push the button on your mic there?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's Douglas Grob.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I don't know, my voice carries anyway. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I am on the power committee for the Northwest Power and Conservation Council. And Carrie, as you know, is our fish expert, and Mike is our fish guy, and Mike is real experienced in all things. But I just want you to know what a pleasure it is to be here and to meet with you today. And you'll talk most freely to them, but I'm just as glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
And thank you also for having us here and letting us speak in front of you and be here to share your concerns. I live over by Great Falls, so it was a beautiful drive over here this morning. And I was past legislator for quite a few years. So certainly not an expert in all these issues, but know about most of them to a certain degree. Fairly new on the council. Some of our priorities here in Montana, as you know, we represent, we've got 4 states that we represent, but in Montana is the resident fish issue, making sure that our resident fish have a say in what's going on, right? And also that we represent our small co-ops here in Montana, that they're represented also equally as our fish issue. So thank you. And looking forward to any discussion, any questions. Doug would be happy to answer them. So.
All right, natural born politician, I like that. I would, I'd open up to Carrie, if you have anything to mention, Carrie.
No, Mr. Chair, just these are the 2 guys that you really need to talk with, but thanks for having us. Appreciate your Fish and Wildlife staff being so accommodating. We've always had a good working relationship with them over the years, working on some of those resident fish issues, like Mike mentioned, other things like Libby and Hungry Horse operations, things like that we all have an agreement on. And your staff's always been super helpful in helping us with those issues and creating our fish and wildlife programs that talk about those issues. And we're meeting them for a while after this today. And so we just really appreciate all they do and all you do. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Speaking of staff, then I would ask Rich or Whisper or Les or Lynn, and probably start backwards and Lynn, Les, the other way with the experience. But they, of course, have been our main principal folks, the resident fish. And so Lynn really has been a tracker and participant in the commission, and then Les as her supervisor. So I would open up to any of you, come up and say something. You gonna pass? Come on, Lynn, come on up, or Les, come on.
Well, I don't have much to say, except as Carrie said, it's been a good growth. A fun thing to do to make sure that the fish are.
Push the button.
I'm kind of new here. It's the first time I've been here for 2 years.
Yeah.
Good to see you all in person.
Could you introduce yourself? No.
Yeah, no, it's been a really, I'm probably the most senior, and certainly then Lynn has been more involved dealing with the Power Plant Council and coordinating all things BPA. So we both have a lot of experience, and Lynn was instrumental in putting together the sub-basin plans for both Flathead and Libby. And that's kind of our current Bible and what we work off now and how we decide to, and what we decide to mitigate for. So for me, it's been good to work with this process, and we've come a long way, and we hope to educate them on what our priorities are and what we're working on. Because every time we get a new governor, we get 2 new guys or gals. And it's great to have 3 guys come and meet with us and understand a little bit about where we're coming from and what we're doing, and get your input so you can support us when you need to in the right places.
Well, it's meaningful to us, the accords that take care of Libby Dam and Hungry Horse Dam. We had a council meeting in Kalispell just last month, and we had a tour of Hungry Horse and saw some of the pictures of the historic past and the total drainage of the reservoir just nearly, and and why they were basically built after Vanport, Washington, and things like that. And they asked up there, because I had somebody tell me how to say Saliska Sanka Kalispe, And so they asked me to pronounce that, and please correct me if I'm horribly wrong on that. It's not an easy thing to say, but I had elders here that I know in the family, so they spent quite a while getting me to get that last diphthong. But anyway, it's meaningful that we have some kind of protection in Montana and the tributaries of the Columbia that we share with the West Coast. And a real pleasure to be working with the tribe and knowing that they're involved too and have your actions and purposes.
Thank you, Douglas, and you did a great job. So you're good. So the, you know, it's been an ongoing struggle for resident fish and getting our, you know, as a headwaters, you'd think we'd start at the top and work our way down as far as taking care of business, but it's historically been the reverse of that. And so we've always felt like the being oppressed and not listened to, and you know, and it's very difficult when you consider the huge impacts that are occurring in our watersheds here to benefit downstream issues. So yeah, if you can be that strong voice and advocate for us and, you know, maintain, you know, what we have, at least for like the Montana operations for flows, et cetera, you know, that's a benefit for us and for our state, for the tribes. We're connected at the hips when we talk about the fisheries here. So it's one and the same nearly. So really appreciate that.
I thought it was interesting and really informative that the entire council, all 4 states, all 8 members and lots of staff on the council, et cetera, went to Sokokanee Springs and actually heard about going deep into the Bob Marshall and Glacier National Park to get the residents fish and to try to bring them and to breed them and get that working. And I've got to say, my heart and my person went out to them by the fact that I could see what they were doing with very little and the kind of dedication and the purpose that they had in accomplishing that. And so I know the tribes are part of that, but it was just interesting and good to see. I know the challenges of Flathead Lake, being here and born here.
Thank you, Doug. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, that made me all warm and fuzzy when you said Bob Marshall and doing that difficult work. But just knowing that you're here today, and I remember when we had our individual on the Northwest Power Planning Council at that time, I think that's the name, Rhonda Whiting was there, Governor Schweitzer, but it's really nice to see that you're at the table. And when I heard Les talk about priorities, and you know, we have some excellent staff here and we try to do whatever we can to protect our resident fish. So I'm just glad that you're here and you're willing to listen and help understand our position and our side and take that forward, because without a voice, we have nothing. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you being the person that's appointed to the commission, right? Yeah. So thank you so much for your work. I appreciate that. Thanks, Tom.
Any other council comments? Seeing none. We do have a somewhat related meeting coming up in Bonners Ferry, but it's not necessarily under your issue. But one of the issues we're talking about is a watershed issue, where there's an immense amount of pollution coming from Canada into the Kootenai River system from the Elk Creek mining. And that's a hardship to the fisheries that both the Power Planning Commission is intent in maintaining and recovering, but it's an added issue. So I would ask you to keep those related type issues on your mind also, and provide an advocacy for correct resource management in Canada as much as you can to help us along with those type of issues. I'm not sure if you're, all the coal mining that's occurring up there. Go ahead, Douglas.
I'm just going to say, I can't remember, and Carrie would tell me I'm appointed to be the liaison that does that. And I did some work with that about 15 years ago too, but just 1 or 2 meetings, and it got going other places. I was on Flathead Electric Sport at that time. But the kind of thoughts that the tribe has are the kind of thoughts I would like to know and to take forward. I assume that you and your staff work through Kerry so he knows the issues that I can basically touch on or present at least when I do that meeting. And it's sometime coming up this summer. Kerry might know the date.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Doug's right. He's the council, as vice chair of the council, he's our liaison to Canada. And we're finally able to start having some meetings again, post-COVID. And so that's potentially one of the issues we can talk about when we meet with them. And as you said, we are tracking that issue as the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, because all that does impact all the mitigation work that we have done above and below Libby Dam. So it is something that we're tracking and get informed on a pretty regular basis. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Kerry. We'll make sure that any new initiatives or actions that we come up with, we'll pass that on to you through our staff. I'm sure Rich is our main liaison with the NRD department for this. And then council member Mike Dulson is also a representative on this particular issue. So we'll keep you appraised on it, but it's been a very disheartening exercise right now. So we haven't advanced anything. It's actually gone the other way. So we had very good successes in the North Fork of the Flathead, protecting that watershed from mining in Canada to stop it before it really got going. But an established operation in the Elk Creek drainage is a little bit more challenging to halt or discontinue. Any other comments from council? Anything else staff would like to add? Brian or Les? Lynn hasn't said anything. I don't know.
As everybody stated, I guess Curry and I were actually laughing outside about how long we've known one another and how old our kids are now and that kind of thing. So it's been a long road to hoe. Yeah, again, just, appreciate you guys coming here today. As you know, and Curry knows, it's not always all roses that we deal with being resident fish, versus salmon. It's often a trudge uphill to get our issues heard and represented and get the funding we need to get, which we could still do a lot more if we had the, ability to do more with mitigation dollars. But it just seems like we're always hitting a wall in terms of getting more money for resident fish. But appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you representing our interests against, I know everybody has interest in the Columbia and we all have issues we need to address and everybody needs funded, but just really appreciate you being here, carrying our story, and hopefully we can do more and work together as well as we have in the past going into the future. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Lynn. So I just want to reiterate that, the water is a powerful thing, and we take our role as the headwaters of the Columbia very seriously. And so the protection measures and correct management should start at the top and work our way down. So we really hope that you would carry that forward as our representative. We very seriously want to keep quagga and zebra mussels out of the last remaining drainage in the United States that doesn't have them. And we take that very seriously and appreciate any help you might have in that effort to protect the Columbia. And haven't really got anything from BPA from that or the Power Planning Council. So it's paramount for us to do that. It's a concern for Montana. So we work jointly with that. And so if there's anything you can add to that, that would be great. But, as a planner, I start at the top and work my way down, because if you start at the bottom and work your way up, you're going to miss the important stuff in the headwaters. And so just appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you for coming. And if you have any other comments, please do right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Yes, your priorities, your concerns are ours, and we will, by working together, we will make sure that we do work together to achieve those goals, the fish issues, the water issues, and all that. So we need to keep in touch and work together to get the job done. So thank you, and thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mike.
And I'll end with say that the real power on this commission or the council right now is this guy here and who he knows and who he talks to. I don't get to talk to anybody but him, but he gets to talk to anybody he wants to. So I'm the guy that talks a lot, and I get anchored for that oftentimes. And I know that isn't necessarily something that the tribes respect or whatever. Fewer words accomplish more, but this guy gets the work done. So and together, I just am so pleased that we're serving together on the council, because I just think we just make a great team together.
Well, thank you, Douglas. You know, you're both of you are very impressive. Your backgrounds are very impressive, and I'm glad that that you're appointed and on this committee by the governor. So communication. So the more we communicate, the more Carrie provides information to you from us or vice versa. That'll be great and appreciative. So coming here today was very, very super nice, and thank you. So good to meet you, and good luck. Represent us well. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you in your new position.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Council. We'll be in the conference room across the way, and some of the things that we hope to talk about is just kind of overall relationship building with BPA too, and how the council can assist with that. So if anybody wants to stop in, you're more than welcome, and otherwise we'll definitely be keeping you in the loop and try to get these meetings on a more regular basis. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. What's next, Jen? Lunch? All right. Wow.
Can we discuss your guys' travel Monday? Remember, you have the card for everybody's room.
I've got the card for everybody's room. Yeah. Oh,
So since I had to do all of your guys' room
Oh.
at once, they just took one name and one card. So he's the chairman, so his name was the first one I typed. So he
I'll
was
go
the
right
lucky
to
contestant.
the River Casino and blow your concession, your money for you.
Find you all in one room.
Yeah.
But if you guys can all try to put it on your tribal credit card, that'd be great. But it's just to show with your credit card.
Well, when I get over there at first thing, I'll stop in there and make sure we're okay. So,
Find you all in one room.
anything, I guess the gift, do we want to do a gloves or a blanket? We think about that right now before we break. Who else gonna go Saturday? Anybody else going to the college to meet the Secretary of Education? Carol and I, Jennifer, three of us.
Well, I'm guessing
I can check with Teresa, what they have planned.
but yeah, I support going to gloves.
So maybe at the end of the day, I'll grab the gloves, Jen. Yeah, okay. Jewelry.
Give them one at a time.
Got one with a turtle in it. It's pretty cool. Take it out. I haven't been making anything. You guys have been keeping me too busy. Mine are the cheapest. Cost you anything. All right, well, if nothing else, we'll break for lunch.
All right. Back at 1:30.
1 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Well, unless Ruthie wants to come in right now. Yeah. Did y'all review the report that Ruthie provided? We didn't really have any chance to comment on it, but want time for her to kind of go through it page by page, I think is what you're asking for, Len. Could probably do it right now if she got a hold of her. Would shorten up the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Shane for 2 hours. Oh.
I go really fast because I know you already read this. And you just want the really good parts. Oh. So, and we are obviously behind in our reporting. The 2021 audit is, you know, once we wrap that up is when I could come in and do your fourth quarter 2021. So now we're going to get into a quick succession of quarterly reports. So I'm hoping next week, if not the week after, I look toward her, then I'll come in with the second quarter and then we'll be in a resting phase until third quarter, which will be the end of this month. So kind of thinking of our first quarter of this fiscal year, we kind of continue on, have implemented your reorganization that you passed almost a little over a year ago. We have all of the staffing and executive officers done. New chairman, Tom McDonald, after the election, and of course, Jennifer and Jim joining the council. We refer to this fiscal year as year 2 of water compact. It seems like everything that we do in our work in finance is always going back to water compact. It is such a big part of everything we're doing now. The nice thing about the way the fiscal years are numbered is just think 2022 is year 2. So 2023 will be year 3 and so on. We received our second transfer of $90 million. And just 2 weeks ago, yesterday, we received the 1 billion plus 22 million towards the indexing increase into our trust account at Treasury. So when you look at what BTFA manages for the total country of 5 billion, our 1 billion's pretty big deal. We're their biggest deal now, I would like to think. So Q2 is when we're
Can you
actually.
say that again? 1 billion.
Yeah, billion with a B. They are gonna stay very busy with that. So as far as looking at how we're spending on the money, the second quarter, so we're not there yet in this report, you'll actually start seeing some of that water compact expenditure. And we created a separate fund just for that. We're continuing to spend down the CARES and ARP funds, and you all are probably ahead of me on that a great deal more because you've actually set those priorities and implemented them at the direction given to your executive staff. And we've also started to get reporting on your principal resolutions, is what we call them, your strategic priorities adopted through the 7 resolutions. And a final note is on pay scale implementation. I know that's been of great interest to some of you. And that has, to my understanding, been fully implemented. So if pay was to be adjusted, it has occurred. And I'm sure some employees by this time have already probably received merit-based increases because you unfroze the salary increases this fiscal year as well. And so we want to kind of keep attention on how those pay costs are coming across the organization and whether we have concerns about that. Looking at our total revenue, we actually have a decrease this first quarter compared to a year ago, because a year ago we were getting all kinds of the COVID and beginning of the rescue plan dollars coming in. So it's not of concern, it's just simply noting that change from year to year, looking at 30 million compared to 43. So it did decrease almost 29%. Projected revenue, which is your tribal or your general fund, which is the one that we watch the most of anything, even more than the compact, because this is the income that you're creating and earning through tribal endeavors. We've got 56.7 million that is projected, and this reflects increases for our corporate dividends and gaming. So we had a net increase of almost 23%, and we're over 25% projected or actual to projected, which is right where we would like to be. So we look at the projected 56.7 quarter, actual of 15.2. So breaking down and looking at those other past years in comparison, looking very good. Dedicated trust, we separate that out from all of the rest of the general fund simply because our audit does that. And this is, just to reiterate, this is the income that we budget that comes off of the principal of the remaining Salazar Trust settlement. Projected was 2.5 and our first quarter is well ahead of that. It's because of the way that we did the restructuring of EKI's loan. So it's the timing of their single payment coming in. So it's going to start leveling off as we see the next couple of quarters. As I was noting earlier, the first quarter is when we transition the water compact to its own funds, so we won't see any of that separated out in this report. Looking at our compacts, contracts, and grants, again, we've got a decrease of, it looks alarming, but again, it's not. It's because of that OAB federal contracts and grants in that very first row, just not seeing a lot of revenue earned. Second quarter is when we'll record the stimulus, or wrong word, the economic relief payment that we paid in January. That'll be reflected in Q2. So that quarterly revenue will jump up quite a bit, at least 16 million to reflect that. On the expense side, we look at the budgeted expense at the end of the first quarter was 178 million. Your general fund Just pointing out the big ones, general fund 34.3, the IHS compact 39, BIA 31. Those are kind of your big ones. And then the water compact, the bottom at 16. And looking at what the quarterly expenditure is, way under 25% in total, 19.3. Some of these, they look like they're overspent or spent high, but it's going to be due to what the period of award is and what that earned revenue to expense is going to be reflected in that quarter. For total, this is one that of course kind of really goes to cash flow more than anything. We never want to see revenue too below what our expense is. And so we're sitting right where we ought to be. The compacts, contracts, and grants, I'm believing is just simply a timing thing. We're not going to be that far out on that. But when I run this report, it's the date that I run it, so. And salaries, here we go. Salaries, the first quarter of 11.1 million is increasing quite healthily, 9.7 over last year. The general fund is really showing the biggest increase. And just to remind you, general fund does include the indirect cost pool, which is a big chunk of that budget. And so as those salaries have increased and the pool programs have added staff, we're seeing those increases there. In the CARES Act, oops, lost my CARES Act programs. A lot of these had to be spent by the end of calendar year. There's a few, such as in our self-governance, that can carry forward forever as long as they're applied toward that purpose. These are kind of some of the ones. The first looks like 7 or 8 are all grant and contract type programs. So those are not large awards. And those ones that begin with 4180 on the rest of that, those are in the IHS compact. Been rather slow to spend, some of them. And then in the bottom of that list, they're beginning in the 4700s. Those are what is in DHRD, and those have likewise been kind of slow to spend because those are Recovery Act or Rescue Plan Act program or COVID related in 477. I start getting ahead of myself. Rescue plan. So ARPA, again, starting off with what has come down in contracts and grants in those 3,000 program numbers, and then getting into the 4191, this big one here, this 6.9, that's what we've applied to finish construction of Ronan Health Center. We should start seeing a lot more activity posted in that in the second quarter and third quarter. I'm understanding that they originally thought it'd be done by September, and now I'm told November, December. So many of those things have just taken much longer than we've originally thought. There's strategic priorities. The one that we focus on here is going to go to contracts that are awarded to tribal preference and other vendors. First quarter, we had a total of 80 vendors that received a contractual payment, and 19 of those were tribal members, tribal owned, or 19%, which I think is really a good proportion, given that that's almost what the proportion population wise is here on the reservation. And their payments totaled 20.5%, but it's really 2 big tribal member vendors, and you can probably guess which one of them is a construction company. The contractual expense is way down from last year. Last year is when we were doing the relief grants to those businesses. So these are mostly going to reflect just actual contracts for services. So contractual, quite a bit down from last year. Council's budget, you're thankfully not overspent. It would look really bad on me if you were, because I prepare your budget estimate every year. Just always want to make sure that is appropriately budgeted. So your total budget, which is split between both general fund 02 account and then the indirect cost pool, is 1.1 million. You've only spent not even a quarter of that in the quarter, so only 19.75% overall expended. And I know I raced through that really quickly. Any questions?
Any questions? Anything? Okay, none whatsoever. Thank you.
All right,
Good job.
you're welcome.
I
Thank
love
you.
the photo. I gotta say,
I love this photo.
I
I
really
do.
do.
It actually was just on social media like a day or two ago. And I'm going, you're always supposed to post photo credit when it ain't your photo. So yeah, this is actually one I think I got from Les Everts or someone in Nerd that was doing a PowerPoint
Yeah.
on restoration of the Jocko. And I thought, oh, this is
What I
perfect.
like to do is just look at their outfits and think about how we
Yeah, that too. But
show
yeah,
it to Teresa and other things, see what we can
Yes.
make.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Wow.
thanks much and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ruthie, for coming in.
betcha.
Jen?
So I told Shane he cannot have 2 hours. So he's really coming in to ask for a change of duty of 2 hours for employees to vote. So as his text was confusing, so I was like, had to reread it.
Oh,
and
so
then
we
I
could
asked-
just take action on ourselves right
Yeah,
now.
so that's all he's asking for is
Oh.
if council will approve it for voting for 2 hours. Because I said,
Wow.
they all went, oh, we don't want 2 hours.
Does that mean if we take that action now, we don't have any afternoon agenda?
No afternoon agenda.
I would entertain, okay, a motion by Len to approve change of duty station for 2 hours for those people engaged in primary voting is June 7th by supervisor's approval on June 7th. Is that the date? Second by Jennifer. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Show of hands. 7, 4, 1 out of the room. And I don't see Martin anymore, so I think Martin left the meeting. Motion passes. I would entertain a motion to adjourn for the day. Everybody square on any details on Bonner's Ferry or? Okay. I'll try to find out from Rich and I'll try to converse with Stu as best I can. It's usually somewhere in like the wee hours of the morning. The casino?
Casino parking lot.
Yeah, okay. We'll meet at the casino. That's a good spot. The casino, which is obvious when you come into town. Oh. Oh. It's 11 o'clock our time, but 10 o'clock their time. Yep. For the field trips. If you want to take the first field trip, you got to be at the casino parking lot, 11 o'clock Montana time, 10 o'clock Idaho time. Otherwise, you can come at 2 and see the hatchery. Bring your bucket. Or just come and, you really do probably have to come spend the night to participate in the meeting in the morning. So you're gonna really want to be there Monday sometime. Tuesday morning, though. Yeah. Okay, we're adjourned. Wow. God,